You mentioned earlier that independent observers haven't had access to the conflict zone, and that includes the media, UN and other aid agencies. Why is that? Why is the Sri Lankan government not allowing it?
Since the beginning, since virtually 2006, when the government decided to unleash its military agenda and decided that it would resolve this conflict through fighting, it has been very, very careful about allowing international access. And that is because of a widespread, it's because of various reasons, but predominantly it's because of a widespread belief in Sri Lanka that anybody who reports on the conflict or even reports on a factual side of the conflict is a traitor or is supportive of the LTTE. So they have been, therefore the media has come under attack not just in the conflict area but outside. And within the conflict area, the presumption is that the government has a lot to hide in terms of the violations of rules of war, in terms of violations of international humanitarian law. But let's not forget that the liberation tigers of Tamil Eelam, the Tamil Tigers, are no innocent party to this conflict. You know, when they ruled over swathes of territory in the north and east, there was no free media in these areas. So this is nothing new for ordinary Tamil civilians in Sri Lanka. Their fate has so far, their misery the stories of their misery have not been told in reality for a very long time.
The LTT has rebounded from setbacks before. Can they rebound from this?
The LTT will never become the kind of conventional military force as it once was, because as we see, it now controls very little or hardly any land. It's a matter of days when the LTT is perhaps completely loses all control over territory. So it will be next to impossible for it to get back to that position of strength. But this does not mean the end of the LTTE or the end of LTTE terrorism or its striking potential. As we have witnessed all through this last phase of the conflict, in the past 3 months to be precise, every military conquest by the Sri Lankan military has been followed and preceded by a subsequent suicide bombing or an attack, whether it was happened in the east of the country, in the north, or in the capital Colombo. So there are underground LTT cadre, the diaspora is getting even more embittered, and support for LTT or the kind of strategy that it represents, a kind of a physical terrorist reply to the Sri Lankan government's military campaign, will have support. So this is not the end of the LTT, and this is not the beginning of peace in Sri Lanka.
So even if the Sri Lankan army is successful and they do take the remaining territory away from the Tamil Tigers, as you say, it doesn't necessarily mean peace will come to Sri Lanka. But what do you think Sri Lanka will look like post this conflict?
As of now, there are no leaders within the Tamil community, whether moderate or militant, who can claim to be representatives of the minority Tamil community. So in that sense, who is going to represent the Tamils? And what sort of power sharing is going to evolve? Are there going to be political negotiations? Is there going to be an ultimate settlement of the genuine political grievances that the Tamil minority community has? These are all questions which hang unanswered.
What role do you think that the international community needs to play at the moment?
The international community has been sort of becoming a bit more vociferous in commenting and putting pressure on the Sri Lankan government, but clearly it has not been enough. Because if, over 5,000 civilians have been killed so far, and these are very preventable deaths because there have been violations of rules of war by both sides, and the international community has not been able to exert enough pressure on both sides. Sure, the Tamil Tigers are a non-state actor and therefore leverages on them are few, but there are leverages on the Sri Lankan government. So the international community really has the responsibility to use these leverages of trade and aid, and multilateral organizations need to exercise this leverage as well to bring pressure on the Sri Lankan government to actually conduct a humanitarian evacuation of the remaining civilians and to prevent these senseless deaths.
Charu Lata Hogg, we really appreciate you coming in to speak to us tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Spoke with Charu Lata Hogg, a research fellow and Sri Lankan expert at Chatham House. I started by asking her what her worst fears were for the coming days, with thousands of civilians still trapped by the fighting.
Well, it essentially depends on the modus operandi of the LTTE. You know, pushed to the corner at the last minute, they may engage in a sort of virtual carnage of the civilians. On the other hand, you know, sort of just so buoyant by their success, the military might decide to actually take it out on the civilians as well.
We're talking about a massacre either way then, are you?
We're talking about a bloodbath, which the UN has already referred to. So it's going to be a nasty and bloody end. And let's not forget that these civilians have been without food or water for a very long time. The last deliveries, ICRC deliveries, went on May 9th. So it's a long time. So it's a starved population. It's a population which has been shelled repeatedly. They're wounded, they're sick, they're injured, they're children. So we're talking about a very desperate and deplorable situation.
We're talking here about the immediate end, but is this the end of the LTTE?
Absolutely not. You know, as has been proved throughout the last phase of this conflict, every time there's been a military success, it's been followed by some sort of a suicide attack or a bombing, either in eastern Sri Lanka or even in capital Colombo. There is enough underground LTTE cadre within Sri Lanka. The LTTE has not lost its striking potential completely, and there is a huge diaspora support for the LTTE.
Are there any political solutions, any blueprints for political solutions, any sort of devolution on the horizon?
So far, whatever the government has offered has been very, very half-hearted. In fact, the proposals that have been on the table have not even been acceptable to the moderate Tamil community. So nothing very optimistic so far, but this is the time for the international community to actually exert pressure, and you know, nothing can be done about the innocent lives that have been lost, but certainly something can be done to save Sri Lanka from sort of future bloodbaths.
International pressure really works in situations like this?
It could do. You know, let's not forget that Sri Lanka, its economy is in dire straits because of it has been a war economy. It is waiting for an IMF bailout. Otherwise, it has foreign reserves just to last a month. So the international community has leverages of donor aid, of financial aid, of military support, of ideological support. You know, no country can live in isolation. So in that sense, there are things that the international community can do.
Charu Lata Hogg there on the future for Sri Lanka.
Within the last half hour, we've been getting reports that the leader of the Tamil Tigers has been shot dead. We haven't been able to confirm that yet, but if it's true, it could mark the end of the Tigers' stand. For the moment, it's still not absolutely clear whether they have finally given up their fight against the government of Sri Lanka. Well, with me is Charu Lata Hogg of the Foreign Affairs think tank Chatham House. And your worry at this stage is that there might yet be a bloodbath of civilians.
Absolutely, because the claims between how many civilians still remain in the conflict zones has been disputed. The government says that 50,000, there were only 50,000 people, they have all left. The UN has claimed right from the beginning that up to about 100 to 120,000 civilians may still be there. So assuming the 50,000 have left, we're talking about people who are still trapped in the conflict zone. And since all communication has been cut off, all access even to the ICRC has been cut off, we have no way of knowing. And it's really important that the government be held accountable to what's going on, and whichever foreign government has satellite imagery on this zone, they need to publicize it and share it.
But if the Tamil Tigers have indeed stopped fighting, why is there still the possibility of a bloodbath if everybody stopped firing? Why?
Well, we don't know that, because the last the government said was they do not accept a Tamil Tiger claim over the internet. They need official communication from the LTTE about a ceasefire. So as far as the government is concerned, the fighting is still continuing. And till Prabhakaran is not caught, till the leadership is not caught, the fighting still continues.
As far as the defeat of the Tamil Tigers is concerned, there's no question that they have been defeated, is there? Presumably that is because of the support they have been getting from China. That is to say, the government has been getting from China.
Well, China definitely tilted the balance. You know, it was the one factor which countered everything else that was going on, both in terms of military supplies, in terms of ideological support, in terms of any scrutiny on this war. You know, if you look at what happened in this UN Security Council, It was China which prevented a formal discussion of Sri Lanka on its human rights record and basically holding Sri Lanka accountable for what was really going on in the conflict zone. So in that sense, China has come out as a big supporter of Sri Lanka. China has also countered whatever positive, India could have on this situation. Because of the fear of the China factor, India has also supported Sri Lanka in its war effort. So therefore, Sri Lanka has effectively played the two big Asian powers in supporting it in defeating Tamil Tigers.
Charu Lata Hogg, thank you very much.